burnout is not a wealth strategy. Figured out that one of the best ways to get rich and to grow wealth is not to seeing billionaires have drama against each other is so funny. I have read almost every book on money and investing. I have read 20 books alone in the last year, from the classics to books that have come out this year. In the podcast, I'll be sharing key things that I took away, and guess what? Some of them surprised me. I'm curious to see if you share the same perspective. Now, most of us think that getting rich is either impossible without a huge salary, or that it requires like extreme frugality. And some people think that working harder is the answer, but honestly, guys, burnout is not a wealth strategy. But you are different. You know that achieving results that you've never had requires you to stop doing things that you've always done. So here are the 5 key takeaways in less than 20 minutes. The first is buy, don't build ideas. The second is chase intellect pursuit, not the private jet. The third is that a broken clock is right twice. The fourth is don't reinvent the wheel. And the fifth is that your frontal lobe harms you, because mine definitely has. The first book is called Never Enough, From Barista to Billionaire by Andrew Wilkinson. And Andrew Wilkinson is a now billionaire from Canada, but he grew up in what would be considered like quite a normal upbringing. Parents that had decent jobs, they were middle class. He didn't go to private school, but he went to really good public school, and he was able to build up a portfolio of lots of different companies. But there were 2 key takeaways in that book. The first is buy, don't build ideas. And this idea was really surprising to me, because I think a lot of us grow up and think, okay, to be good at business, you have to come up with the best business idea. You have to be the person that's like, I'm going to invent the next iPhone. I'm going to invent like Uber, but like for this, or like Netflix, but for like pet products. Like there's so many ideas. But what he did that was quite interesting, he used to work at a coffee shop when he was trying to figure out his next stage in life. But he saw this guy that would come to his work every day, and this guy would sit on his laptop. I mean, this was like early to mid 2000s. The guy would come every day and get coffee, and he was building websites. And this is back when building a website would cost like a lot of money, but this guy figured out that it wasn't too difficult to do. And when Andrew would go to work every day, he was like sweeping the floors and chatting with this guy, and he realized himself that it was not that hard. He could find a client that he would charge like $70 an hour. And then he had a friend that was a developer that would be happy to be paid $30 an hour. And Andrew realized he could pocket the difference. He realized he could take ideas that were really interesting, that had already been built, and that he would then take what he would make from these service-based businesses, because agencies make a lot of money in terms of cash flow, and he would then start investing them into companies. He was really intrigued by like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, and he just consumed all of their books. He was so obsessed with them, and he figured out that one of the best ways to get rich and to grow wealth is not to invent new products all the time, but to take things that already exist and put your money into them. He started becoming like the tech version of Warren Buffett, investing in new technology that was coming out. And public investing is very similar to this. You want to look at companies that align with a vision or an investment thesis that you have. He read like every book by Warren Buffett, and he would refer to a lot of like Warren Buffett quotes, like the money is in not the buying and the selling, but the waiting, or that it is better to buy a wonderful company at a fair price than a fair company at a wonderful price. Basically saying like buy good businesses, even if they're not like the most discounted businesses or on sale. So he kept buying companies, and he ended up under his umbrella company being able to own over 30 businesses. He had 1,000 employees. He was doing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, and it's actually what ended up helping him become a billionaire. Now, takeaway number 2 is chase intellect pursuit, not the private jet. And you might be listening to this and going, Sim, I want the private jet. The title of this video, the title of this podcast episode said how to read these number of books and what the takeaways are to get rich. I am not here for a morality life lesson, and I hear you, I understand. But one of the takeaways from this book that actually really got me, I mean, the book is called Never Enough, so you kind of understand where he's trying to go with this. But he met Charlie Munger, who is like the Courtney to Kim. Like Charlie Munger is still very successful in his own right, but Warren Buffett is the more famous investor, and then Charlie is kind of his right-hand man. And obviously rest in peace, Charlie. But he went to Charlie's home. He was invited because Charlie had this idea of a a business merger that he wanted to bring up. And he was really surprised that Charlie had a very stable home. He didn't seem that bougie. And Warren Buffett is the same. He's been living in the same house he's had for years and years and years. And he said that Munger was quite a walking, talking encyclopedia of how not just to get rich, but how the system worked. He was insanely rich, but he preferred to live like he wasn't. And when he made his first million, he shared that he didn't spend any of it, reinvested every dime, and continued to live off his average sort of annual salary. It was really interesting to read that. But until a few years before his death, this man was like economy on Alaskan Airlines, even though Berkshire Hathaway, the company that he co-founded, had literally hundreds of private jets because they own NetJets, which is a business that lets you rent out private jets. It was just like economy. You don't even want to do like premium economy, like maybe like a seat that doesn't lay flat, but kind of lets you go back a little bit. It really blew my mind. But more importantly, what he kept sort of speaking about was you want to focus not on building wealth or building businesses to have the fancy things or to have the nice cars. You want to follow your curiosity and you want to spark that curiosity. That will take you so much further away. I mean, I have been there. I have tried to make businesses in the past that I was just not interested in, like a sunglass business that I sold because I'm just not a fashion person. I didn't care enough. Andrew also noticed that while other people in business like Elon Musk had shared their opinions on global monetary policy, which Andrew is quite sassy, like in brackets in his book, he writes, something Elon Musk knows very little about to medical viruses. And then he adds another brackets and he goes, something Elon Musk knows even less about. And I kind of loved that. I was like, pop off, like seeing billionaires have drama against each other is so funny. But he said that Charlie was known to be the oracle of one thing, the oracle of investing, of business. And if you asked him on his opinions on other areas, he wasn't scared to not be the smartest person in the room. He was just focused on what he was curious about. And so I found that very, very interesting. The third takeaway was from the book, The Money Trap by Alok Sharma. And this is a book that has come out this year, like I think only a month ago, but guys, I absolutely love it. It is so well written. Alok Sharma was the president of SoftBank, but before that, he was an investment banker. He lived the rich life. He had the big 6-story house in London. He said that J.K. Rowling was his neighbor, which is such a flex. I mean, he was like rubbing shoulders with celebrities, but what was really interesting is his perspective on what went wrong with SoftBank. Because if you don't know, SoftBank was the firm that ended up investing billions into WeWork, and then WeWork went bankrupt, and it was kind of this whole debacle. I honestly highly recommend reading about it. I might even do a video if that's something that you're interested in. But the third takeaway was that a broken clock is right twice. And you might be thinking, well, Sim, what on earth does that mean? And what really surprised me is that Alok was observing Masa Son. Masa Son is the founder of SoftBank. And in some circles, he is seen as like a little bit too crazy. In other circles, he's seen as like a visionary. But Masa missed out on investing in Facebook quite early when Facebook had a very, very high valuation. And a Russian investor instead bet Masa to it. And so Masa didn't invest in Facebook. And when Masa, Mark Zuckerberg, and Alok were having dinner, it came up where Masa like said to Mark Zuckerberg, he was like, I really regret not investing in Facebook because even though the valuation of the company was too high and I didn't think it was really worth it, like it ended up working out in the long run. What was quite interesting about that is because Masa Son believed that he missed out on a huge opportunity and he was not taking enough of a risk, he almost wanted to make sure that that did not happen again. And when the right opportunity came around where WeWork was looking for external funding, he doubled down on it. And he wanted to invest in out-of-the-gate founders because he believed in this idea that crazy founders would bring crazy returns. But it ended up being a mistake, and WeWork ended up filing for bankruptcy in 2024. One of the things that I found most interesting that Alok was speaking on is you have to be cautious of overhyped markets, and you need to have a really grounded approach to investing to avoid pitfalls, to avoid speculative bubbles. And we have to evaluate why we're taking a risk. Is it ego? Is it the fear of making the same mistake again? Because sometimes if we invest in something and we get it right, you have to remember it is not always because we're the most intelligent person in the room. A broken clock is right twice. And so I really had to evaluate myself in that, because there have definitely been investments. I bought shares in Tesla and they did so well. They went up 400%. This was when I bought them pre-2020. And then I was like, yeah, electric vehicles. And I bought Rivian shares and they went down 80%. So you've got to understand why you're taking on that risk. The fourth takeaway was from the same book, and it's the idea of not reinventing the wheel. When it comes to investing, Masa, the founder of SoftBank, would talk about the long-term technological advancements, but he also kind of thought of it in this way where the US is this big, large happening market, and what the US is doing, you can actually replicate in emerging markets and have the equivalent. So when Uber was growing, Ola in Asia started growing, and Ola is just a Uber equivalent, but they were first to market in their country. Or when Amazon was growing in the US, in India, Flipkart started, and that was like an Amazon equivalent. And by investing in Ola and investing in companies like Flipkart, they were basically saying, hey, we have seen from that side of the world that this has begun, and we see that it's working. So why not just bring that to our country? Why not bring that to India before Uber gets here? Why not bring that to China before Uber gets here? And I've actually thought about this before, because growing up, I grew up in New Zealand. So I would see that if a trend started in the US, it would take 6 to 12 months before that trend would reach Australia and New Zealand. And I would watch companies get started and grow there, and then someone would make an equivalent here. A really good example of that is Warby Parker, which is the glasses company that were we are disrupting, we are going against Luxottica, against the big corporations. In the best and simplest way possible, they made glasses for millennials. And then these guys in Sydney picked up on this, and they called their company, so Warby Parker in Australia, Bailey Nelson. They were like, let's just take two white names and put them in front of each other and start a very similar company. And that did really, really well. So this idea of not reinventing the wheel is a very good way at trying to grow your wealth, because you do not have to come up with the next big thing. You do not have to come up with this new smart engineering thing that you patent. You can just invest or create companies that are not reinventing the wheel, but just doing it in a different demographic. And I think that was just so simple, but so that founder of SoftBank, he knows a thing or two. Also, this is a little addition takeaway from the book. I have to say, some of the salaries in this book are wild. Alok was sharing how one of his friends, who was the chief business officer of Google, was making $50 million a year, plus package at Google. And then when SoftBank approached him and was we want to poach you, he took around $70+ million a year in salary. And it's fair to say that that friend is also a billionaire now as well. Now, the final takeaway was from the book How to Get Rich by Felix Dennis. And Felix is an entrepreneur. He is sadly passed away now as well. And he started to make his wealth by publishing magazines and publishing newspapers. And this was during the time where if you had some content, advertisers were paying you like crazy. They were like, please take our money, take our child, take our life, just take it all. Oh, you want $20,000 for an ad? Hell yeah. It was just the golden era. So he doubled down on that and he was able to grow his wealth that way. But one of the things in the book, guys, this is such a good book, but he said, if you are young, you are in the prime time to be bold. There is no better time to gamble on yourself. And my main takeaway was that our frontal lobes harm us. When you are younger, you are just so much more likely to take risk. You are so much more likely to not understand, which is a good thing, not understand the repercussions of your actions or your mistakes. You're not worried about what people think, and you're not used to doing things a certain way. When you are younger, you have what he calls the stamina required to build a fortune. You have reserves of energy that you might never have again. And he said your youth gives you the license to fail, and is something that older individuals are often reluctant to risk. It just really blew my mind, because if you think about it, so many of us say, I want to build my wealth, I want to start investing, or I want to get better in my career or grow my business, but I'm so young. I'm only in my 20s, my 30s, I'm in my early 40s. Like I'm still figuring it out. And maybe when I'm older, maybe when I have more experience, that I will do well. And we look at people that are older than us and they have nicer houses, nicer cars, and we go, gosh, like I can't wait to be that one day. But what this book taught me is your frontal lobe harms you because when you hit like 26, really, but anytime over that, you start thinking in a way that is just so much risk averse. Like I used to travel so freely. I've done so much solo traveling. Guys, I would arrive in a country, log onto the Wi-Fi, and then book a hotel and then stay there that night because I didn't mind. Like I could just figure it out. And now I look at that and I'm like, what is wrong with me? Like I was a solo female in her early 20s traveling. Like how am I still alive? But when you are younger, you just take so much risk. And it was such a good reminder that youth gives you the license to fail. I absolutely love that line. And in fact, he said something that really sparked my curiosity. He was like, young people are the people that I am envious of. He was like, you envy people with more experience, but they envy you because you are up to date with trends. You know what works. You are not worried about what people think of you. And it just really set the tone for me. And I really wanted to end this episode with one final quote from this last book, which said that you will never be ready, young or old. So just begin, start as you are with what you have. And like that gives me chills every time because we wait for things to be perfect, but it never, ever gets that way. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode, let me know what you think. If you've been watching on YouTube, let me know what you think. It is the best way to grow the podcast when you like, when you subscribe, when you leave a comment or share it with a friend of yours, because more people that find out about the content that's going to help them grow their wealth and help them become better investors is going to result in a world where we have more investors and more people with choice. And I cannot ask for anything more. So with that, I'll see you next week.